mentioned before about not having a social security net in India, and I was wondering what you think is required to institute such a net?
That's a very good question. I would not want, I mean, with due respect to the French, because that's a system I know very well, the French system is not the one for us. I know the French safety network very well, and it is the object of serious abuse. I don't know if it is abused by people in Australia. I don't know the Australian system. So, in other words, what I am in favor of is a concept by a Finnish economist. I don't know if you've heard of this universal basic income. Are you okay? So I genuinely think that the 350 million people, and only for the 350 million people in India, because in India also we have a history of abuse, leakage, corruption, and so on. So I think the kind of social safety net, we are now struggling by saying every able-bodied man, so it's very sexist, man in a family will be given wages regardless of work for about 2/3 of the year. But there is again leakage. So the fact that everybody has been given an identity card helps. At least now the identity card is linked to the bank account, and so the government is able to transfer the money directly. Much better. But I am rapidly coming to the conclusion that a universal basic income is important. It's even important for Australia, I think, frankly. Not for everybody, obviously, but it is obscene that Oxfam now says exactly 8 billionaires in the world own what the bottom 50% of the population owns. I mean, I don't know if younger people like you are sufficiently shocked by it, but I am. It is obscene and it is unacceptable. How do you let these people go tax-free, scot-free? Just tax the hell out of them. What are you going to do with the $2 billion, for God's sake? And what gives you the right to think you're more intelligent than the rest of us? You just happen to be at the right place at the right time. Trust me. I've seen enough life. I'm 60 years old. I know I'm in the right place at the right time. There are 10,000 Indians far smarter than me who are rotting. This humility is what I expect from. I've got a daughter who's 30 years old and a son who's 25. Both are Canadians. And I'm full of respect for your generation, because I find that you guys have more empathy than what we did. Ours was more of a bubble thing, Indians are famous for this bubble thing. What I'm saying is, we will keep our house clean, beautiful marble, just get out, shut yourself. That's why we are not as shocked as you when you come to India. You just shut yourself completely the moment you leave home. You can't do that. So just answering your question, instead of putting in place a safety net the way Australia has done, the way France or the Western countries have done, which is breaking down. France is not able to sustain it. France's safety net is, for the first 3 years, you get 90% of the last income drawn. Just millions of people say, hey, much better to stay at home. Why would you want to work for 10% extra? That kind of abuse is not something India can afford. But a universal basic income is also important for countries. I think you will have less of a backlash against globalization. So that's the brief answer. But we are a long way. You can legitimately ask an Indian the question, you're spending $58 billion on Rafale aircraft carriers, space. We've just launched 40 satellites together, all at the same time. It requires quite a feat, actually. And yet, we are not a country which has gotten rid of open defecation. Sorry. We are a country which hasn't gotten rid of 350 million people living below the poverty. So, there's an answer for that, obviously. But I think funding shouldn't be a problem for India. If you can fix it only for the 350 million people. And how tough is it to ask a billionaire in India? We are the least philanthropic nation in the world. I'm very ashamed to say this. Indian philanthropy simply doesn't exist in India. The billionaires will simply, I don't know about Australia, I mean, whether your billionaires are much more forthcoming in terms of giving. I don't know. But India, no, not at all. Bill Gates came here, and to give him credit, he and Melinda were here. They have a wonderful foundation which does great work in India. They said, listen, for every dollar that an Indian billionaire gives, we will give you a dollar. That's saying a lot. In spite of it, it was pathetic. So this is something I'm not able to understand. But that's how just we are. I have, as I said, more faith in your generation. So.
Yeah, I had a question. There are a few, policies coming out of the Modi government that have been, taking like foreign policy pretty, like by storm, like the Make in India movement, and then also your Look East policy. For the Make in India movement, if you go to the website, or even if you just like look it up on Wikipedia, the numbers are really good. India actually has seen some change in its economic growth based on the amount of FDI we've been getting. But has that at all been translated into, the lives of those 350 million people living under the poverty line? Like, has that been able to translate into jobs for the poor or anything?
Okay, the question of jobs in India, and I'm giving a talk tomorrow evening on precisely this subject. We are, so far, by and large, economists will argue that we are stuck in a jobless growth situation. We are the fastest growing economy, by the way. Even in 2018, we will be the fastest growing economy. I'm just going by percentage figures. But that doesn't tell you the full story. India's challenge is that you've got 1 million people entering the job market every month. So that's one problem. The second problem about this 1 million is that they are extremely unqualified. So they will have to be trained. I'm talking even engineers. There is an impression outside that every engineer who comes out of India is an IT whiz kid. Actually, the fact of the matter is that we have a few schools which are absolutely top class, which are as good as MIT and Stanford. But then we also have a whole lot of schools, engineering schools, which are thoroughly mediocre. So we have that problem. Third, whether it has made a difference, it would be hard to argue that it has not made a difference. I think it's made a great difference. But in India, the story is always that, isn't it? It's half full. The glass is always half full. And that's one of the problems. But I think what this government has done, though, is they have created a massive movement in favor of self-employment. That's a very, very good thing. The one example that springs to mind is that Harvard had a case study on how in Mumbai you had this complicated system of about 10,000, 15,000 lunch boxes being delivered to people, hot food, through people on bicycles, and with all sorts of markings which were obscure. And Indians, as you know, are very, very complicated when it comes to food. Somebody will not have garlic, somebody doesn't have meat, somebody doesn't have beef, somebody doesn't have pork, rest of it. And yet the right lunchbox always reached the right person. So what the government has now done is, the Flipkart and Amazon are encouraging these guys to go and deliver the stuff now at people's homes. So instead of delivering lunch boxes, these guys are now delivering the online sales in India have boomed, just absolutely exponentially. So I think a lot of self-employment is being created. The Employment Provident Fund organization is an organization that talks of employment in the formal sector. I'm only responding to you as far as the formal sector is concerned. Yeah, because the informal sector in India, it's simply impossible to get a grip on it. The formal sector, it seems to me, is creating 4 million jobs a year. We need 12, it's creating 4. I'm assuming the rest are all being absorbed by Uber and your Ola car rides and so on. So they are all getting employed. Whether they are underemployed or not, I don't know. So I think the employment situation is much better than before. Certainly better than what it was 3-4 years ago. But we have a long way to go.
And like the like just specific to the Make in India and the FDI that we've gotten from that, has that been translated into jobs? Like,
Sure. I mean, I would say that in as much as the FDI has come in the areas of construction, civil aviation, that is airports, and Make in India defense.
is that not like, I thought Make in India wasn't for defense.
Oh, Make in India is for defense as well.
Really?
Yes. And in my view, that has the highest potential. So, Make in India for automobile components, that's huge. It's definitely created jobs because it comes from my home state of Chennai, Tamil Nadu. So, I know that particular case. I mean, automobile components, definitely this is a niche area, and Make in India has helped there. Make in India construction, yes. We've got a Donald Trump tower coming up, but anyway. So, you'll have construction, you have labor, which will get jobs. So that's absolutely, I think, fine. Where I think we are struggling is what South Korea, Japan, and others did. They also faced a similar situation in the 1960s when 60-70% of their labor was in agriculture, and they then got them to work in the dirty industries. When I say dirty industries, textiles, footwear, leather. These are called dirty industries, but dirty within quotes, of course. You've got better environmental standards now, but fundamentally they are dirty. So the South Koreans and the Japanese were able to quickly take these illiterate workers, farm laborers, and train them to make toys, travel luggage, Nike shoes, and your toys. So I think they were able to take them to this sector. Now the problem that India has is that you already have excess capacity thanks to the Chinese. They are not able to sell. And they have factory capacity, which I'm told is enough to cater to the entire world. So India is left with this monumental challenge, and that is the real challenge for us. What do you do with this labor on agriculture if you cannot shift them to textiles, manufacturing? How do you shift them straight to IT? You can't. You'll have to train them in engineering, and they're simply not trainable. It's like the same welder I talked about who was 50 years old. All he has done is weld a car. How are you going to train him in IT suddenly? So that is the real challenge. Yes?
So you've mentioned the importance of sea trade routes and sea in general for the global economy and for the balance of power in the world these days. Global warming creates an interesting case where northern oceans become usable for trade, and probably by mid-century they'll be usable for about 10 months. How this north trade passage will change the balance of power, and where does India fit in the picture?
It's a very good question, actually. I must confess I haven't thought too much about it, but the whole idea of containerization, ship containerization, and sea lanes of communication might get disrupted. We don't know. You've got various schemes coming up. You've got 3D printing. I don't know the future of that area. We've got automation, chain block technology could be used in the area of shipping. So that, again, we don't know how this will change. But my sense is that this will open up more opportunities for India, because we have good relations with countries of the north, so that's not an issue. And if it means bringing down the cost further, that's fantastic. We would prefer to use it for gas, natural gas. We're trying to see if we can shift from our dependence on coal and oil. We've already promised in Paris that 40% of our energy will come from solar and renewable by 2030, and we're well on I mean, this is one of the cases where actually India is ahead of its target, thanks to the government, which has taken huge strides. And it's solar is the answer in India. Look at, I mean, this is supposed to be the height of winter. Look at the sun shining. I mean, we should really, Australia, so much sun. There's no reason why solar should not be used in a place like India. And the advantage with solar in India is that you don't need infrastructure which is normally associated with oil and coal. That takes a lot of money to build. The supercritical technology that is needed for building a coal-fired plant is now expensive. So I think I haven't done a detailed study on this subject, so I must confess first to your question. It's a good question. I'll go look it up. I don't pretend to have answers to everything. But it seems to me like that's an extra option, actually.
Natalie, go ahead.
I was going to ask, would India ever consider like birth restrictions in terms of its burgeoning population? Like example, China's one-child policy?
The answer would have to be a resounding no. Much to my chagrin, actually, because we tried. In 1975, there was the younger son of Indira Gandhi, a person called Sanjay Gandhi, tried, and he failed so miserably, that since then, no Indian this is an untouchable subject, red line. No Indian politician will ever be able to tell, I don't know how the Chinese I mean, it's just amazing how they got away with that. I mean, telling people you have only one kid, try that in India and you'll have a riot on your hands. It's out of the question completely. Having said that, my sense is that the Chinese realize they've gone too far. Actually, one of the things that is said about India is that we've got a demographic dividend. We are the one country in the next 20, 30 years which will have a working population which is high. Every other country, maybe not Australia, but a lot of other countries in the West will be very old. So we still think it is a dividend, but I underline that this will be a dividend only if we invest enough resources in education. Otherwise, it could easily become a demographic disaster, frankly. That's the danger for India, I think. Yep.
I just had a question, like we talk about the renewable energy, and that would probably need quite a lot of like labor force, right? To make, not as much to make it happen, but it would need a decent amount. So why can't we shift like people in the agricultural sector to renewable energies?
The only area where we can shift them is construction. So if you want to construct solar farms, you could do that. I think that's already happening. So, see, we also have a massive infrastructure deficit in India. You may not have seen it immediately, and I realize now the airports in Delhi are pretty decent. It was not the case 20 years ago. So now I go to Paris airport and I feel miserable. But anyway, so that's a sign of the times. But I think in as much as there is going to be massive infrastructure activity in India, to the extent of something like $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years, I see the idea of shifting them not to textile factories and toy factories and shoe factories or the dirty industry. The construction area is the area, which is, there's again a social problem in India, encouraging somebody of your age, let's say, if you're doing a professional degree, fine, but would you please go join a vocational school to become a plumber? We lack world-class plumbers in India. I mean, I've just finished building a house and I know it was a nightmare getting a plumber. I mean, so plumbers, masons, carpenters, but Indians would not do it. They would do a BA in witchcraft. I'm joking, but and then, or a BA in Bollywood, which is actually not joking. So BA Bollywood, and then say sit in a ZTV studio and say I'm analyzing the box office ratings of a movie. For God's sake, I mean, do something useful in your life. So they won't do that. So what is the harm in being a plumber or a mason or a carpenter? So there are social caste factors at work as well. We are trying to overcome those. The Germans have the best model for that.
I reckon even Australia, like I didn't like come because
Sorry, what did you say about Australia?
like even Australia, like you have people who do trades and they're so well respected and they earn so much money. And
Yeah.
There's a massive class, like.
I agree. I agree. And I think it'll come because I had to advertise for a plumber for my house. I think it'll come. It'll come. And I had to pay through my nose. So there will come a time when people will say to hell with it, I'd rather be doing this, which is paying me enough so we have a real, it's odd I should say this in a country of surplus labor, but there is a massive shortage of skilled labor. IT area, we lack labor, we lack skills in India. We have a lot of mediocre skills, but top skills have already migrated. So that's the other big issue. So any reaction from, I see that all of you are more diplomatic than me. You've clearly skirted the issue of Australia-China. Nobody wants to talk about it. And nobody wants to talk about Quad. Can I ask you to react briefly before we go off for tea?
About what?
Australia-China relationship. All is well with the honeymoon love affair? That's all I'm asking. So then tell me. I'm interested in dirt. Come on.
I think Australia likes to think that it can separate its strategic interests from its economic ones.
You want to have your cake and eat it too.
All
All of us do.
I don't know that we achieve that very well, but I think there's still a lot of. I think the politicians like to ignore the fact that that's a factor, that China is such a big. It
Sure.
should be such a big part of our strategic interests, but they kind of ignore it.
There's also social aspects, like we're historically quite linked to, I mean, outwardly we're historically quite linked to the US, but like in reality we're such a multicultural nation, and like the Chinese community is a huge part of Australian society.
What would the percentage of Chinese be in the Australian population? Chinese origin.
Quite low.
It's quite big.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It's like in the single digits.
Are we looking 15%, 20%?
Single digit.
But this
Oh, single digit.
generation as well, new generation will have that cultural link.
I think it's still single digit. It's only in like Sydney and Melbourne.
So that's good with citizenship. There's a lot of Chinese in Australia as well.
We have a lot of international students, like I come from ANU, right, like in Canberra. I think around 40% of our student population is international, and most of them are Chinese.
Really?
So we have a lot of international Chinese students, and I reckon either they'll go back, or they'll go to Hong Kong, or they'll stay on in Australia. So maybe it's like
Is that...
education is increasing.
Okay. Is there a feeling in your generation that, of course, Australia has been a lucky country and that you had massive resources? That's the only way I can describe it. I think you're very, very lucky to have so much that God has given you, really, literally. I'm not a Christian or anything, I'm just saying. But do you think Australia has to wait for a big idea? My sense is that. And your generation will have to come up with that idea. Because whatever you've done now has been enormously successful, and I don't deny that. But somehow it seems yesterday's idea, the idea of, extracting minerals and coal and exporting it, that's yesterday's idea, yeah?
For that, I mean, for me, like personally, I think Australia's like a big idea would be renewable energy, just because like.
I was hoping you'd say that, yeah.
Yeah, because it has the potential to be like a massive leader, because we've got a lot of.
I
sun,
agree.
A lot of ocean, things like hydro, a lot of wind, so we've got like three of the biggest ones. But
Totally agree, yeah.
I think at the moment Australia just relies a lot on coal as an export, so.
I think it's because there's a lot of employment in coal and in
Even now?
Yeah,
there is.
And the politicians get a lot of money from
it.
it.
Yeah.
Sustainable energies, there's only short-term employment, and then it kind of just looks after itself.
There's declining. I mean, like Adani as promised like 10 times more jobs than are actually being delivered. So yeah.
Anyway, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. I don't want to stand between you and your tea. Thank you. I'll see you again anyway.